Well, hey, folks, we are live. Welcome to the program. And this is the pre show. This is the first 3 minutes, like we've done all the time. We go live on the radio station at 3 minutes after the top of the hour. And so in 3 minutes, we'll go live. So we're just getting set up here, trying to get things working now. And let's see if we are broadcasting quite yet. It's going to in just a minute for me on this end because we are in a delay mode. So here we go. Very soon we'll start rolling. And in the meantime, I'm going to start making sure we've got everything going here. That's what the first 3 minutes are for. Let's see if I hit that. Yeah, I think there it is. Yeah, I got feedback even. So we're doing all right. All right. So, what do we got now? We got about 2 minutes, a little less than 2 minutes. We go live on the radio station. So everybody stand by. I got something wonky that happened to my mic stand here, and I'm not quite sure how this happened. There it is. Something got jammed and stuck. That was awfully weird. It's got these rubber bands in it here that kind of make it all stick. So for those of you just joining the show for the first time, the first 3 minutes is just killing some time while we make sure everything's up, everything's flowing, and we're ready to go at 3 minutes after the top of the hour live. That's when the show officially starts. So welcome to the pre-show. And here we go. We're going to be going here pretty quick. You can comment down below, and the comments are not like the chat room was in the old show. We're still going to work on seeing if we can get a better chat room going, but you're able to go into the chats below, join the conversation. I can do that right here and say, hey, there you go. And that hey will show up down below the video window, and you can join the chat room there. You may have to refresh every now and then to see the fresh comments. And then re-hit the start button. It'll pick up right where the show is live. And so that's the way it works. And for now, let's move forward. If it sounds like I'm talking haltingly, I am. Let's go dark, and we'll come back in just a couple of seconds. Stand by.
Intrepid radio program with Scotty Roberts. Intelligent talk.
Hey, folks, welcome to the program. Oh, look at that. I got a little feedback. Let me hit the right button. Boom. Welcome to the program. I'm Scotty Roberts, your host, and this is the Intrepid radio program right here broadcasting live over on odysseyradio.com. That's where you can hear the audio format of this show. And we're also broadcasting from Patreon. Now, somebody just said, Grumpy Stack said over in the chat room, he said, hey, Schmexy. Why, thank you, brother. Hey to yourself. He's in Patreon and flipped him over to YouTube. There is funny as it seems, while I'm not broadcasting on YouTube anymore, we have to use YouTube to carry the stream to all the 3 different programs that have to operate to make this work. And so it is an unlisted video that's over there. Nobody can see it except those who are members of Patreon. So if you're chatting and it shows up in a YouTube window, that's okay, because that is the carrier of our stream from StreamYard to Patreon, back to StreamYard, and so on. So there you go, without getting too technical. So, sweet, says Grumpy Stack. Yeah, you won't be able to find that YouTube stream over on my YouTube channel. It's just for us who are members over here on the Patreon stream. And so thanks to everybody who is a member, who has become a patron to my stream. I see we have a few more today. I appreciate that. And everything that you're doing to help this show proliferate, grow, and hopefully make a little better income stream so we can do more and more things. Now, this show, we don't want to just do the radio. We want to start doing some live events like the ghost hunting that we've talked about in the past, and having live guests doing tarot and other readings and things like that that are apart from the daily show of Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 9 p.m. Central, 10 p.m. Eastern. And so just keep tuned, stay tuned, spread this around to your friends that you think might be interested, have them come over and join the channel and become a patron to this channel. And hopefully you're going to see a whole lot of good stuff that you're going to enjoy being part of as we go. Doug Stack. Oh, yes, I see your comment in both places, Doug. So tonight, I want to talk about something that we've talked about in and around this before in other shows, because we've talked about alien life and alien contact and what would be the ramifications of having contact with alien life. And now, of course, and by the way, what have we seen over the last 3 decades, especially? We've seen all kinds of pop cultural references, movies, radio shows, books that speak to a coming alien, either invasion or contact or something of that nature. And I remember 20 years ago, we were talking about, is somebody behind all this trying to prep us for an inevitable contact, something that they know already exists or that has already happened? It just hasn't been widespread. That secret has not been released. Is that a secret that can be kept under wraps? Sure it is. I think something that major. Why do you think governments would want to keep that under wraps? Did Eisenhower encounter aliens from a crashed craft? Did President Truman? Has every president since then had the little black book that tells them, the book of secrets that tells them? I know that was a fictional thing, but does that really exist where they know these things? I remember Bill Clinton, and I've mentioned this before, Bill Clinton being interviewed on Jimmy Kimmel's show and late night TV. And Jimmy Kimmel asked him, this was a few years ago, and he asked him, I want to know, the big question I have for you now that you're out of office, do aliens exist? He said, that'd be the first question I'd want to know the answer to. When, wait, was it Jimmy Kimmel or was it the other guy? Jimmy Fallon. Now I can't remember which one it was. I think it was Jimmy Kimmel. He said, I'd want to know the answer to that right away, right now. I want to know what's going on. He says, so tell us. And he did it very comedically with Bill Clinton. And Bill was very comfortable. There was somebody I watched, Ben Hansen. You've seen him in some of the UFO shows. You've seen him in some of the ghost hunting shows. He's somebody I met and rubbed shoulders with very briefly when I was with Taps Para magazine back in 2009, 2010. And Ben was former CIA, and he also had this, what would you call, they did a TV show on this. It was fictional. You see it all the time. The being able to read body language, read facial expression, to tell whether somebody's telling the truth or a lie or fabricating or stressed or whatever it might be. We're going to get into that a little bit tonight, just a surface touch on that tonight regarding this whistleblower. And so he was watching Bill Clinton, and he has it up. You can go onto YouTube. You can find it. Ben Hansen, the Bill Clinton interview on Jimmy Kimmel, and regarding UFOs and stuff like that. And one thing he noticed was that Bill Clinton was very comfortable at the beginning of the interview, and he showed all the signs that showed there was comfort. The way his fingers were on the arm of the chair, the way his elbows sat, the twitch in the corner of the mouth or lack of, the way he blinked, the way he'd turn his head, things like all of these things come into play and you can tell that somebody's lying or telling the truth pretty much. And So as soon as they started talking about the alien issue, Jimmy Kimmel says, I want to know, what are there aliens? Have we been in contact with aliens? Does it exist? Immediately, Bill Clinton's small body language bits started to change up. And he showed signs of nervousness, showed signs of tension, of stress, no signs of lying per se, but signs of what did he call it? He says, this is something that happens to somebody when they are faced with something that stresses them and that they know they can't talk about, or they know they have to keep hidden, something hidden. That was the thing. And so it was very interesting. Just look that up. Ben Hansen, looking at the body language video of Bill Clinton, aliens, etc. And so this is something that I want us to take a look at tonight. I'm going to get into some body language stuff with this whistleblower. But here's the big thing that was presented. And if you're not aware of this, if you had not heard the story, it's a pretty fresh story. It's about 24 to 48 hours old, but it has been all over the news. And where I got off on the Bill Clinton story, was that we've seen all kinds of things happening over the last 30 years. It seemed to be precursors or something that is kind of whetting the appetite a bit, or maybe in a more, what's the word I'm looking at? A darker sense, it would be trying to prepare the public mind for something. And that would be like alien existence of aliens, the UFO craft are not of this world, things like that, first contact, all of those things. Have we been prepped for this? Now, how would you release that information? We could just say, well, why don't we just go out and tell the whole world? Well, I think you would have incredible panic going on. We're going to talk a little bit tonight about the religious response to that, what that might, how that might factor in. You're going to have all kinds of response. So what would a responsible government do? Would they just spill the beans to the public, or would they say, now wait, we've got to take this in a measured dose. We've got to reveal this slowly to the general public. And now you've been seeing all kinds of stuff coming out, especially when they changed UFO to UAP, unidentified aerial phenomenon. And in so doing, they were able to tacitly admit that there are things that the Air Force and the military have seen that we cannot explain. We have things of unknown origin. They start leaking out. You look at Bob Lazar. I don't know much about the details about how to talk about all the details around Bob Lazar, but he came out 30 years ago talking about his work at Area 51 and what he saw there. And he's a very credible individual when you watch him and listen to the words he has to say. So all of this stuff being leaked out slow but sure, you hear disclosure over the last few years. You have people that are very involved in the alien UFO disclosure movement that are out there. And as you're seeing this happening, you're seeing the government loosening up toward it. You're seeing people starting to loosen up to it a bit. Travis Walton, Josh Kemp asked in the chat room. Travis, what's his name on Skinwalker Ranch? Oh, that's a different Travis. I'm sorry. Travis Walton was the Fire in the Sky guy from the 70s. As far as Travis, what's his name on Skinwalker Ranch? You're talking about the guy that owns Skinwalker Ranch, I think. I don't have all the names on that, but yeah, they're finding things out too. So all of this, let's wrap that initial introductory knot here that I've been throwing out in all different kinds of strands. Let's knot that up a bit and say, what is it that's really going on? And is there truth to the whistleblower's story? Now, if you have not heard about this, I'd be surprised because I've seen it. I even saw clips from CBS News, I saw clips from Fox News, from CNN. All these different news organizations are carrying this. By the way, if you don't see CNN as a news organization, did you hear they fired the current the latest CEO? They've hired somebody new who is going to take steps to try to convert CNN back to what it used to be in the 1980s, a news source. Until, remember, Rush Limbaugh came out and called it the Clinton News Network. It's when we started seeing them go more left and left and left. And then, of course, the last election, unbelievable off the scale. Now you're seeing there's lashback from that. And so the new CEO, can't remember his name off the top of my head. I just heard this news today that he's going to be starting, and his vision is to turn CNN back into more of a news. Why do you think they had Trump on for a town hall meeting? I think that is some indicator where they want to go. Travis Taylor, there it is, Josh. Oh, the NASA guy from Huntsville, Alabama, Travis Taylor. Yes, and so CNN, all these places have carried this story, and so I've got some material up here in front of me, and it's not a long, involved story, although you can go watch videos on this. Go to YouTube and look up UFO Whistleblower, and you're going to find some things about it. I've got a couple of things up here that the UFO Whistleblower says we have alien craft in our possession. He exposes the U.S. government's secret UFO operations. I got to put on my glasses for this, guys. Sorry. Of course, if you're listening on radio, you don't see that. If you're watching the video, you can see what's going on. I'm going to go over here and check with the chat room over in Patreon very quickly. Again, we don't have the premier chat ability here on Patreon. We're working on that. Trust me. We're going to get a better chat room going for this. But there's Barbie D. I see you over there. Good to see you in the chat room. I still have to go out to chat. There's Uncle Dave Potter. Randall Flagg is here. Doug Stack is here. Everybody, you still have to go out to chat, but hello, everybody. If you're on your phone, it's going to be even a little more difficult. If you're on a computer and you can open up a couple of tabs, you'll be able to do it pretty well. That's one of the drawbacks of Patreon right now, until we find a better program to feed the stream in so we can do the chat. We're working on it. Let's leave it at that for the moment. But let's get back into this about the whistleblower. He is a guy named, he's a former intelligence agent named David Charles Grusch, Grusch. Grusch. He's a former intelligence officer, and he's made stunning allegations about the United States government's involvement in secret operations related to UFOs of non-human origin. Now, full stop right there for a moment. Think about this for a second. This is in all the major news outlets right now. This is something that's being talked about. This is a man who is a known former intelligence officer. From what I've heard, highly decorated. And lots of commendations for his work. Top secret security clearance. And he's made these allegations that the United States government's involvement in secret operations related to UFOs and alien life is real. And according to him, these UFOs have crash landed on Earth already. Not like last week, like a long time ago. And there is more than one. There's many, according to him. The whistleblower also claims that the U.S. government, along with other nations, is engaged in clandestine efforts to reverse engineer these pieces and developed advanced weapons. This is something that Bob Lazar was involved with, his facet of what he was working on at Area 51. Go look up some of Bob Lazar's interviews. And I think one of the better interviews was he was interviewed by Joe Rogan a couple of years ago. And that's a really good look up Joe Rogan and Bob Lazar. And you're going to see a phenomenal interview if you don't know much about Bob Lazar. So the claim that the whistleblower, Grusch, is making is that there was illegal concealment of information and an 80-year arms race behind it. Grusch asserts that the U.S. government deliberately withheld crucial information from Congress, hiding the discoveries made from these crashed UFOs. He argues that the government's motive is to gain an advantage in an 80-year arms race to exploit the advanced technology. So what would that tell us? Was there weaponry aboard these craft? Or are they finding ways to apply the technology that they've discovered by reverse engineering? Grusch has submitted details of these alleged operations to Congress and the intelligence community inspector general, and along with filing a complaint against the Department of Defense. As a result of his decision to blow the whistle, he claims to have faced ostracization. Ostracization. I can never say that word amongst a handful of words I have problems. Ostracization. Ostracization. There you go. And he claims that they're exotic materials and non-human vehicles. And by the way, on that ostracization, I would be more worried that somebody be out to kill me, not just ostracize me, not dox me, not make me look like an idiot, but maybe take my life. But which is worse? I mean, somebody kill you or somebody make you look like a fool for the rest of your life? Don't know. There are disinformation and misinformation tactics that can apply to all of this. But the exotic materials and the non-human vehicles, Grusch, who served in Afghanistan, he worked for the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, the NGA, and the National Reconnaissance Office, the NRO, and revealed that the materials recovered from UFO crashes include intact and partially intact vehicles. These vehicles, he says, have origins beyond the realm of human technology, potentially suggesting the existence of spacecraft from other species. And as a matter of fact, Grusch has come right out and said that. Now, retired Army Colonel Carl Nell, also part of the Unidentified Aerial Phenomena Task Force, supports Grusch's claims. And he acknowledges the existence of a clandestine arms race focused on reverse engineering technologies of unknown origin. Stop again, full stop, and think about that for a minute. Think about the ramifications of all of that. That these are things that secret covert arms of our government are saying that this exists, that these crafts have been found, that alien life exists, and that this life is something, or this technology is something that we are reverse engineering in order to find out a way to become more advanced in our weaponry, to defend ourselves better, or to make ourselves the most powerful. Now, it's kind of funny when you look at fiction and you look at Star Trek, look at Star Wars, look at good science fiction. Everybody that holds back information or is somehow using the secret information to make themselves the most powerful, they're always the bad guys. Have you ever noticed that? Uncle Dave says he was part of the UAP task force. You said that a few minutes ago. Sorry, I missed that when you first said it. So what do you think about that when you say that we are doing these things in order to better our position in the world as a supreme power? The United States of America is supposed to operate under different principles, but we do have to have power. We do have to have strength. We do have to be strong in this world, or we wouldn't exist. And frankly, right now, if the USA dissolved, so would a hell of a lot of other parts of the world that are being held together by the United States. But our engineers and international engineers, according to Grusch, are involved currently in trying to reverse engineer technologies of unknown origin. And this Army Colonel Carl Nell, who's part of all this as well, he says he maintains that Grusch is credible and this is true. Now, there's confirmation from Pentagon chiefs and NASA involvement. Just days before Grusch's revelations, physicist Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick, there's a good Irish name for you, the director of the Pentagon's All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, AARO, A-A-R-O, he confirmed the sightings of unidentified metallic orb UFOs worldwide. And Dr. Kirkpatrick presented the latest findings to NASA's panel of scientists and experts studying the UFO phenomenon. And NASA's independent panel proposed recommendations, including destigmatizing UAP research and researching for alien artifacts within our solar system. And it was also revealed that NASA will collaborate very closely with the Pentagon official UFO investigators on top secret cases. Now, the question is, who are the people that are withholding this information from us? If there are presidents, what did even Donald Trump said? Something about, oh, you don't know what I don't know. Something to that effect. And he wouldn't answer those questions. Who's telling them they can't say those things? Donald Trump, who was a president that said, I don't care what anybody thinks. I will do what I will do, and I will say what I will say. Meaning, I'm a leader, and I'll take the leadership role. What has to happen for somebody to be able to say to even a Donald Trump, you can't talk about that? And he doesn't. What's out there? Who is above Congress in the United States? Who are the people that govern this? You got any guesses? You can put them in the chat room. Let me know what you think. But that's kind of a nerve-wracking thought all by itself when you say that there are people, there are organizations above our government and keeping facts from our government. Now, I know that there are people out there who speak to these things a lot more articulately than I do. They're very well versed in these issues. I'm not as well versed. Who is the guy? And I met him on a bus, of all things, at an event, and we sat and talked for about an hour. Who is why I'm slipping on his name, I don't know, other than my brain's tired or I'm just an old man. I'm getting to be an old man. He's leading the disclosure movement. For some reason, I can't come up with his name tonight off the top of my head. And somebody's gonna say it, and I'm going, yeah, him. That's right, him. So he's the one that's kind of the head, at least the figurehead of all the disclosure stuff that's going on, and pushing for disclosure in Congress and so on. Somebody come up with his name and let me know what it is. It's a simple last name and I can't think of him off the top of my head for some reason. But anyway, we see all of this stuff is going on right under our noses, yet somebody on top is preventing us from knowing it on an official level. Who does that? Who has the power to do that and to keep us from knowing these things? So how do we move forward and seek the truth on this matter? What's going to happen next? Dr. Kirkpatrick outlined plans for AARO to deploy dedicated sensors to capture typical UAP sightings, separate from the existing military defense sensors, by the way. And this development signifies a significant step in studying and documenting unexplained aerial phenomenon. Scientists, policymakers, and the public are all calling for increased transparency and government collaboration to unveil the truth about UFOs and the potential extraterrestrial contact. So as the world delves deeper into the mysteries surrounding UFOs, the revelations made by David Grusch shed light on a hidden world of advanced technology and potential encounters with non-human intelligence. The quest for truth and understanding continues with hopes of unlocking the secrets of the universe and our place within it. But then you have to ask yourself, is he telling the truth? I watched a video, and I can't repeat everything this guy said just simply because I didn't take notes. But go look up psychologist. What is his name here? His name is. I got to put on my glasses to see his name. Dr. G. It says here. Well, who the heck is Dr. G? Go look up. Here, you know what? I'll even put it into the chat room. I'm going to copy this link. This is a guy that does the same kind of thing Ben Hansen does. He looks at body language to try to determine, as a psychiatrist or psychologist, to try to determine whether or not somebody's telling the truth or lying. If you watch this video here, let me post it into the chat room over on Patreon. Watch that video and you're going to get an idea. It's about 8.5 minutes long, but he goes through some highlights of the news interview that was done with Grusch. And he points out that there are things he does that could indicate that he's lying, but also could be big indicators of him being under a major amount of stress. Or somebody that is coping with the disbelievability of what he knows to be true. He said there was one scene where he said something like he closed his eyes and he shook his head while he's saying something positive. He says those are alternate things working against each other. And the closed eyes and the raised eyebrows, surprise at his own words. The closed eyes, I forget what he called that. I think it was the fear or the stress of letting loose information that he shouldn't be letting loose. He said, or he's just lying. He's either fabricating the whole story, but then he's got other high-ranking military that vouch for his credibility, as we've already talked about. So it's an interesting mix here, but go watch that video when you're done with the show here, of course, so you can see what a psychologist is saying about the way Grusch talks, the way he presents himself, his face, his head nods, his closed eyes, his raised eyebrows. And he says the very first thing he comes on before he even says a word, his lips are pursed like that, like this. He says that is a huge sign of stress. That's a huge sign of somebody being way under stress and stressful about the things he's talking about. So you can go take a look at that and make up your own determination by watching that and see what you think of that. I have some other information up here. The UFO Whistleblower is saying that we are already in the United States in possession of alien craft not of this world. I think those are the exact words he used. And he's saying, maintaining that this information is being illegally withheld from Congress. And he filed his complaints. Now, other intelligence officials, both active and retired, with knowledge of the programs that he's been part of, through their work in various agencies, have independently provided similar corroborating information, both on and off the record, as well as vouching for his credibility again. Now, there have been a large number of alleged UFO whistleblowers over the years, including many who were kooks and some were frauds. However, the whistleblower in this case has notable credentials. And I've already mentioned what he's been part of, where he's served. And what he's blowing the whistle on are reports that, in addition to the publicly known government UFO or UAP studies that Congress has authorized, there are classified programs squirreled away in different agencies that they've been operating without proper congressional oversight, and that they've been withholding information from Congress, kind of like a real-life X-Files, if you will. And he says that these programs include one dedicated to retrieving alleged off-world technologies. You hear that right? There's a program that is specifically dedicated to retrieving alleged off-world technologies, including materials from UFO crashes and landings. And this program is said to be part of an 80-year-old Cold War to retrieve and reverse engineer such materials by the U.S. and other near-peer competitor nations. Think Russia and China. Now, most strikingly, Grusch claims that we already possess an intact UFO that was apparently abandoned at an undisclosed location. Why would aliens abandon their spacecraft? Could it be something like, if you watch shows like Picard, Star Trek, all of these, and you see their time travel shows and all of this stuff, you'll find that they're, fictionally speaking, they'd get separated from their ship, they'd get lost, they'd be held in detention somewhere for some reason or another. And is that what we're facing? Tom Fitton, Judicial Watch. I don't know, Josh Kemp. I just saw your comment there. I don't know if he's said anything about this yet. I've got to look into that and see if he has. The Catholic Church and World Economic Forum. I've got something up here from a Catholic source. I'm not Catholic, but I found their take on it to be interesting. We may get to that. So, as you're looking at all this and trying to weigh all this information out, you start looking at how this stuff is coming to us, who's in charge of it, who's got credibility, who doesn't, and what the claims are. Is it so outlandish? Let me ask every one of you listening to this show tonight. Is it out of the question that there is alien life out there that could travel to this planet and visit us? Well, according to the physics we know and understand, we say, no, that's impossible, science tells us. What if there's technology that we're not privy to, that is unavailable to us, that we haven't discovered yet, that we don't know, that allows this kind of travel to take place? If it is indeed intergalactic or intragalactic travel. When it takes us 3 years to fly to Mars, imagine getting somewhere that's 1 billion more light years away than that. Where are they from? Now, these are big things that we have. But imagine, back to the point, imagine discovering an intact UFO with nobody in it. Where is everybody? It's like the Flying Dutchman of UFOs. So in June of 2021, 2 years ago, Grusch filed a complaint with the Department of Defense's Inspector General about the withholding of information from Congress. And he says that afterwards, he experienced months of reprisals and retaliations, contrary to U.S. whistleblower protection policies. Somebody was saying, you just did something you weren't supposed to do. We're going to nail you now. And thus he issued a new complaint in July of 2022, last year. The Intelligence Community Inspector General determined that this complaint was credible and urgent. That's the Community Inspector General, Intelligence Community Inspector General. And the investigation into his reported mistreatment is ongoing. So what are we to make of all this? How credible is Grusch? How does someone in the U.S. government really have, or does someone in the U.S. government really have off-world tech? Is that far-fetched to you? Josh Kemp says absolutely not. I say the same thing. Absolutely not. Yeah, Senator Harry Reid didn't agree with his politics, but he was right about something. He was a big believer in UFOs and always talked about it. And those other planets have been around longer than we have, says Josh Kemp. And none of them are flat, by the way. All you flat earthers out there. So Grusch has better credentials than many previous whistleblowers. He not only worked for the Defense Department, he worked for the part of the Defense Department that works with UFOs specifically. And it's plausible he may have learned about programs in other agencies that are hiding from congressional oversight. Also, the debrief reports several highly placed officials who also worked for the UFO program have vouched for him. They said he's reliable and or confirmed parts of his story. And finally, Grusch signed his complaint under penalty of perjury. So he's got legal exposure if he's lying or found to be a liar. Do you think for a moment that those who don't want this information known wouldn't find every way possible to prove to at least to the people looking at him that he's a liar? Try to make him out to be a liar? They don't care what happens to his life if they're trying to hide this secret. Maybe the best thing that could happen is disclosure. I don't know. Why do the aliens listen to our government if they're really there? Oh, okay. We flew billions of light years to get here, but whatever you say, I don't know. Maybe there's a sensibility there we don't understand. And of course, it's all speculative. We don't know any of this for certain. So, but all of this is in favor of Grusch's credibility. But it doesn't prove that he's right, nor does it prove that he's telling the truth. Only time and further disclosures are going to reveal that. However, at least a part of what he's said is true. The U.S. does have materials that have been for many years alleged to have come from alien tech. And there have been recent studies of them that suggest that some of them have unusual properties. And we've talked about that in some of our past shows. But what's most striking is Grusch's claim that we have an intact UFO that aliens abandoned for some reason. I'd love to know more about that claim just by itself and to be able to investigate it. Wouldn't you? Wouldn't you want to hear more about that? And why wouldn't our government why would the people that are not revealing this to our government, our Congress, why would they be withholding it? Is it for our good? Is it for power? Is it some... Now, I can't blame them because I don't know what the reasons are for withholding it, if it's all true. But you'd have to ask yourself, why are they holding it back? I'd love to know more about it. It isn't clear how much Grusch knows about it himself. And based on the reporting, it would appear that he's heard that the covert material retrieval program that he's blowing the whistle on has the crap, but he may not have even seen it himself. He's even said in one interview I saw him, I haven't really seen that. I don't really know that. Consequently, he may simply be misinformed, which is par for the course in this area. Lots of UFO whistleblowers make dramatic claims that are based on what they've been told, only for it to turn out that the claim can't be backed up. Bob Lazar is probably one of the most credible people I've seen come along. Then there's another possibility for what could be going on. Somebody could be conducting a psychological operation, a psyop. During the Cold War, both the U.S. and the USSR played mind games with each other, and these included UFO reports. Sometimes UFO claims were used to distract people from classified weapons and spy tech that we were developing. In 1987, a series of documents known as the Majestic 12 papers, you've heard of these, we've talked about them before, began to be published. These were allegedly internal memoranda and other documents that had been part of a UFO study program that dated way back to the Truman administration. And they revealed that the U.S. had a crashed UFO and alien tech and was in contact with aliens, that some of them even lived among us. I told you a story on this show a while back about a friend of mine who had become involved with somebody that claimed that he was part of a facility outside of Albuquerque, New Mexico. There was a huge underground facility. Think of it in a comic sense. What he said existed in what you saw, and if you ever saw Men in Black, and you saw that huge underground complex that was filled with hundreds of aliens from hundreds of different worlds. According to this guy, he said he worked in that facility and that it really existed and it wasn't comic like you would see in. And he did some things, told some information that he shouldn't have known. Before his death, Dr. Stanton Friedman, who wrote the book on Roswell, and a big UFO researcher, I was in a conversation with him about this guy and our mutual friend, the woman that was my friend. And he said he wanted to talk to this guy, and he did. And he said, well, inconclusive is my take on him. He says, but I will say this. He knew things he probably shouldn't have known were he not deeply involved in these things. So there's that. So one of the individuals involved in the ensuing Majestic 12 affair was an Air Force intelligence officer named Richard Doty. Doty had been previously involved with New Mexico businessman Paul Benowitz, who believed he had uncovered an alien invasion at Kirtland Air Force Base. And Doty confirmed Benowitz's fears, but Richard Doty is, in my opinion, a liar who lies. He's admitted that he was running a disinformation op on Benowitz to divert him an actual classified program the businessman had stumbled onto. So then Doty shows up in the middle of Majestic 12, which began at the end of the Cold War, when the Soviet bloc and eventually the Soviet Union itself fell apart. The Majestic 12 documents were exposed as frauds. And one of the motives may have been to fake out the Soviets and give them reason for pause. So in their delicate situation, they might not act too aggressively if they thought the U.S. had alien tech and alien allies. Would you believe that? You can't fight me. I got aliens on my side. Was that the bullshit we were trying to sell them? I don't know. Now, 36 years later, Russia is at war with Ukraine, and the world is involved. And Putin has been nuclear saber rattling, and suddenly government sources are indicating that the U.S. has an intact UFO that we've been reverse engineering. Could this be another psychological operation? Could Grusch be part of that? Someone might be using Grusch in a new attempt to fake out Russia. Or Grusch might be an active part of the PSYOP. Or Grusch might be innocently mistaken based on what he's been told. Or he might be absolutely right. And only time is going to tell us what's true about that. We don't know for sure. And that's the problem. We just don't know. So is he credible? I've seen already some stories and articles that say there are red flags on his story already because Grusch has never himself actually seen any of this information or seen anything akin to an actual vehicle that's been obtained by us that we're reverse engineering. Now, he hasn't seen any of this. So you have to take into consideration he's using secondhand information that was given to him, and he's blowing the whistle on this. But he doesn't know for sure because he wasn't there firsthand. So what do we have to assume from that? We can assume that either one, he's telling the truth and the people that talk to him are telling the truth, or that two, he's a pawn in something different. We don't know that for sure either. So this is the big fly in the ointment in all of this, is that we just don't really know. We don't know what's going on. We don't know what the truth is. But how would you feel? What are your feelings on this? You can express them in the chat room or write us. Tell us what you think about all of this. Does this sound credible to you? Does this man sound credible to you? Does the story itself sound credible? Uncle Dave says Jeremy Corbell, not sure of spelling. He said, if that's the guy you think I'm thinking of, it's not. It's if that's what you're referring to. No, it's big disclosure. Look up UFO disclosure, and you're going to find somebody's name. And damn it, I'm just going to do it myself right now. UFO disclosure movement. Let's see if his name comes up. And why I would forget his name, I don't know. Stephen Greer. There it is. I was going to say, easy name to remember, Greer. If you haven't heard of Stephen Greer, you can go look him up too. Go to his website, and you can look him up. And he is very big right now. That's maybe a trite way to put it. He's really one of the figureheads that's at not even a figurehead, he's active, pursuing alien and UFO disclosure with our government. I actually sat on a bus with him back in 2012, invited to a big event. It was kind of a secretive event. It was a private event. You could go only by invite, and it was just people in this field. And I was able to sit with him. We were sitting on a bus waiting to be taken to the facility for dinner. And we talked about this stuff before he had even got the ball really rolling in a big way. So look into Stephen Greer and what it is that he is doing out there. And you're going to see some information as well with disclosure. I'd like to get his take on Grusch and see what he thinks about it. But here's a question I wanted to ask. And damn, we've only really got about 8 minutes left, 7, 8 minutes with the radio audience before we have to take off. But how would religion react if we discovered extraterrestrial life? How would you react? If you are a person of faith, would that affect your faith? If you are part of Christianity that believes this is the world God created, God made mankind here, God sent his only son to die for us, redemption, heaven, hell, all of that stuff, how would that be affected if you found out there's life on other planets? With astronomers that are getting ever closer to discovering extraterrestrial life, you have to consider the impact it would have on the world's major religions. And the impact of finding life on another planet would be felt across every facet of our society, including religion. How do you think it would affect us militarily if we're fighting a little border squabble with somebody or a major war with another nation? How would we feel if we knew that we weren't alone in the universe and that perhaps those visitors, those other people out there were more powerful than us and we were the small kids on the block, or the new kids on the block at least? If there's life elsewhere in the universe, the possibility that we'll discover it within the lifetimes of our children is pretty high with the way we've been going. In the past 25 years, scientists have built a powerful foundation upon which the search for extraterrestrial life can take place. And while we won't be able to exchange messages with extraterrestrials anytime soon, as far as we know, by the end of this century, we're likely to know if we're alone or have biological company in the galaxy. And humanity can make no discovery more profound than that. Could you imagine the absolute profundity of knowing that there is alien life out there and that we've made contact with it? The existence or non-existence of extraterrestrial life won't prove any one theological system right or wrong, but being able to prove that life exists out there somewhere will have an enormous impact on how each follower of a religion understands their own particular faith. Perhaps more importantly, knowing that there is intelligent life out there just might change the way we treat people of other faiths on this planet, and people of other political persuasions and other countries, our enemies. Will they be our enemies anymore? You have to start by assuming a single deity controls the entire universe. And if this is the case, are the rules for living according to the principles ordained by God identical on every planet? What of life that begins somewhere and it transported somewhere else, like through panspermia. So we know, you know what that means. We'll get into it another time, for time. So I've got about 3 minutes left before we have to end with the radio station. Or to put it another way, would my religion make any sense to any alien that was visiting here? Most Christians are likely to think that the God they worship is the God of the whole universe. The obvious corollary to this assumption is that Christianity can be exported, that extraterrestrials can find and perhaps should be converted to Christianity, they think, just as European export. But why? Why would they have to be exposed to that after 2,000 years since it happened? And if we're limited by the laws of physics, we'll be able to transmit news of the birth of Christ to the rest of the universe in a reasonable amount of time. But why? If he's unknown for the last 2,000 years. Is that relevant? Is it viable? Is it real? If all beings in the universe are elevated by the existence of Christ and God, we might have to ask how those otherworldly beings will learn about the birth and resurrection of Jesus that occurred on planet Earth approximately 2,000 years ago. So, it's almost a non-question. Christianity, in other words, is a religion only for humans on this planet. Were we to discover that extraterrestrials exist, we would have no reason to teach them about Christianity because Christianity would, theologically speaking, make absolutely zero sense to them. And Christianity isn't the only religion on earth, by the way, if you didn't know that. So, you got Muslims, Islam, Orthodox Jews, Buddhism. That's more a philosophy. So you've got all these different religions out there. Those are the three major Western Abrahamic religions. Hinduism is not earth-centric. They could practice anywhere in the universe. Zen, all of those things, whatever. Those who follow the path of Buddha seek to achieve nirvana and end their personal suffering. So you've got all of that that's going. Now we got about 30 seconds and we got to be gone from the radio station. So I want to say to everybody out there listening via the radio station, live long and prosper. Join us back here on Patreon for the Captain's Cabin.
Join us every weeknight at 9 p.m. Central Standard Time, 10 p.m. Eastern. The Intrepid Radio Program, a Scotty Roberts Productions broadcast.
Well, and welcome back to the captain's cabin. Good to have you all here tonight. Thanks for sitting in for the show. This is now, for those of you who might be new here, Captain's Cabin, dubbed thusly by the listeners of this show over the last couple of years, is kind of more informal. It's the after show, the post show, the afterglow, where we come to discuss the topic of the night or other things. Sometimes we stick around for a while. Sometimes we don't stick around very long at all. I'm going to give you in the chat room right now. You can still connect with me live via our StreamYard app. So if you click on that link there or copy and paste it, you can come into the StreamYard window and I'll be able to see you and I'll be able to bring you up just like every other time. So hopefully you're getting used to a little bit the way the chat room works on Patreon. Again, we're going to work on that and try to get a nice stream flowing chat room that works a lot better than what exists there now. And it might already be there and I just don't know where to find it yet. So for as much looking and researching and putzing around in this program as I've done, we'll have to see if we can find a better one that works. So go ahead. And if you want to join the show, you can click on that link or come on in and we'll talk. Uncle Dave, if you're out there, or a Field Guy, or anybody that usually chats, I don't think Field Guy is here, but feel free to come on. And if you don't, that's okay. It's still new. I don't know if it will work the same way, but I'm assuming it's going to work the same way. Since I can see some of your chats over in StreamYard, they're showing up through the YouTube channel. Which if you can click into the YouTube channel, you're going to be able to see it. I know I see Grumpy Stack and Josh Kemp mostly coming in through YouTube into the StreamYard. So if you want to try that, you can. And frankly, I'm going to sound like the wizard. Remember the wizard from The Wizard of Oz? When Dorothy gets in the balloon and she misses it because Toto jumps out. Oh, you're still not seeing a chat. Can you see the chat over on Patreon, Josh? What are you seeing now that you're chatting with me now? Where are you doing that? It says you're coming via YouTube by the little logo next to your picture. So where are you chatting? Where are you typing your comments? If you go over to Patreon, you go click on tonight's show, you hit the play button, and then you'll see right down below that window, right below it is the chat room, the comments, and you can hit the button, load more comments. You can see all the comments that are being written there. The only problem with it is it's not free flowing. It's not streaming. So you have to, every now and then you have to refresh that page and re-push the start button, which will pick you up right where you left, right where the show is playing live. And it'll update your chat messages down below that window. So I'm just looking to see if people are, oh, look, I got Uncle Dave. Uncle Dave. How you doing? Hey.
Oh, I got my audio turned down. Hold on.
Oh, that's all right. That's all right. And we'll see if you pop up. There you are. You popping up over in Patreon. So you're there.
I'm there.
Good to have you here. So what do you think of all this? What do you think of life elsewhere? I know you and I have had these discussions for 30 years almost.
I followed this stuff for a long time.
Yes.
So I don't believe that the Majestic 12 is all BS. I think that them saying it's BS is BS.
Is the BS. And that's the hard part in a lot of this. Who's misinforming who?
Because I think that it was never intended to go public.
Yeah.
Okay. And it did go public. There was a book put out, I want to say in the late 70s, early 80s called Above Top Secret. And they published
I've got that
a
book.
lot of these documents. Book. Yeah. It's a big, huge blue book. It's like 3 inches thick or more.
Sitting on my shelf over there.
And there's a lot of interesting stuff that comes out of that book. And a lot of these Majestic 12 documents are in there, really published for the first time. And the story that they're fake comes out sometime later. And I think it's the government saying, "Oh, that's fake. That's misinformation that was put out during the Cold War," and I don't buy that. In the same way, they came out years later after Roswell and said, "Oh, they were crash test dummies that we were
I know
practicing parachute stuff."
I remember that was the 50th anniversary, I think it was, of Roswell, which would have been 97.
And then it came out that those crash test dummies weren't done until 50 something.
Yeah, they didn't even start using them. They didn't develop those for another 8 or 9
and then
years.
They came out and said, well, it wasn't that. It was really they had like in a 5-year period, they had like 7 different stories as to what Roswell really was.
They stumbled and bumbled all over everything back and forth.
That to me just says, well, it is what we thought it was in the first place, or you wouldn't be making up all this crap about it.
That's it.
So
I remember, I still remember, it doesn't seem like it was 25 years ago, but it was the 50th anniversary of Roswell. And I remember it was on the news. I think at the time, 25 years ago, I was probably watching CNN. But, that's Clinton era, so CNN or Fox, but it came on as a special report. And it was on several different channels talking about Roswell, the 50th anniversary. Air Force general or whatever he was comes out all with the salad all over his his medals all over and in his uniform, and he's talking about what you just said, the crash test dummies. While the alien bodies that they found were actually crash test dummies. And like you just said, it was revealed right after that. It was fact checked before we even used the term fact checking. And it was fact checked and was found that, hey, crash test dummies weren't used. 1947 was Roswell. They weren't used till like 1954, 1955.
Yeah.
So blah, blah, blah.
So, and I look at stuff like, I can't think of the kid's name, but there's a young man in Britain, he's not young now, but back in the day when this happened, he was in his 20s or early 30s, maybe tops. And it's in the 90s. So internet wasn't what internet is today. Okay. But he hacks into the Pentagon. And one of the things he finds is a series of documents on what they list as extraterrestrial officers and crew.
Yes.
Okay. For a program called Solar Warden. Now, the extraterrestrial didn't mean that they were extraterrestrials, like as in aliens. It meant that they were off-world. They were
extraterrestrial, outside of this world, right?
They were Americans. Well, and I don't think they were all Americans. I think they may have included British and some other nationalities. But they were Terran officers and crews serving on board ships off-world. Okay?
Yep.
And they kind of tried to debunk that. They wanted to prosecute him. And Great Britain said, oh, no, we're not giving you extradition of this man.
Yep.
If your security is so lacking that this kind of information can be easily pulled up, that's your problem, not our problem.
Yes, not our problem. Yep.
And so that was rather interesting. And I look at the whole Solar Warden thing, and the whole concept behind that is these are ships. We had reverse engineered things from Roswell and other craft, and had built our own craft and had our own crews within the solar system and elsewhere. Okay.
Yes.
There was a guy that was on Art Bell when this came out. I remember listening to Art, and he was interviewing some scientist or doctor, and I don't know if he was a NASA type guy or what. But anyways, one of the things that he said is, imagine where you think our technology really is, where the government's level of technology is compared to what they let us know about, the common man. Okay. And he said, I can guarantee you it's 200 years further than anything you can imagine.
Wow.
Also about that time, they were talking about the story of the exchange with the Ebens. Are you familiar with that?
No.
So, okay. So during the Eisenhower administration, Eisenhower, they had a ship fly in, and I can't think of the name of the airfield. My brain wants to say Wright-Patterson, but it wasn't Wright-Patterson. It's another one. But anyways, alien ship flies in and meets with Eisenhower basically on the tarmac. They set up a meeting space, and they had an exchange with these aliens.
Okay.
And
I have heard of that.
Part of the deal was that I would send, and I think it's like 12 officers, and they would leave us a certain number of men as an exchange, both in technology and culture, so that we could learn about each other. Okay. And that these men were all selected, or men and women were selected. They were all orphans. They had nobody. They worked in the government. Nobody would really miss them being gone. They were specifically selected on all this. They had a whole list of psychological
criteria. Would you do something like that if you were asked?
Oh my God, yes. Wouldn't think twice about it. But I have family to leave behind. They didn't.
That's it, right?
So it was easier for them to leave because they weren't involved with anybody here that was going to say, "Hey, where'd Jan go?" or "Where'd Bob go?" or whatever, or to be on another planet and then find out when you get back that your parents died or something while you were gone.
Yeah.
So they were specifically selected so that they would psychologically be able to deal with being gone. And in fact, I think 2 or 3 of them die on this other planet. So anyways, the story is that they go and they do this exchange program, and they're gone for almost a decade, and then they come back. Okay. And they've lost 3, I think, of their original party, and they are debriefed, and they go through all this stuff, and they set themselves back up in life. But somebody within the group has journaled the entire thing and releases that document onto the internet.
Oh.
And that's where we first learn of what we call the EBEN, extraterrestrial biological entity, something like that, is how we named them, which is kind of bizarre.
I guess I don't know much about that. I thought,
but
the Eisenhower part on the tarmac rung a bell, but
so that's worth looking into.
Sure.
And the document is rather thick. And I know at the time I downloaded it and saved it onto probably a Jazz drive or a zip drive or something big like that.
Jazz drives.
Yeah. I mean, that kind of ages how long ago this information came to me. But so that was kind of interesting. But this stuff has been going on for decades. We've been lied to since 47.
Oh, sure.
Okay. And I was watching a UFO show earlier today, and it dawned on me, these guys aren't very good at flying. Or there's something within our atmosphere or our planetary magnetic sphere or something that messes with their ships, because the 2 ships that go down in Roswell crash. They're not shot down. They crash. In 36, there was a ship that went down in Germany in the Black Forest that the Nazis actually find. Hitler's in power when this happens, and they start reverse engineering, and it crashed. There's a big one in Russia that crashes on its own. There's one in Mexico that crashes on its own. There's just a whole bunch of, and you're like, they're not being shot down. I get it if we were shooting them down, but these are just crashing. So is there something within our own magnetic sphere that messes with their ability to stay airborne? I don't know. Because it seems like you've flown all the way here from someplace and then you crash.
Yeah.
What's up with that?
Unless, there's so many of them, according to some of these people, like Grusch, there are innumerable numbers of these. Innumerable numbers. That's a little redundant, but there are innumerable craft that have flown over us for the last 50 years.
Yeah.
And so 75 years now since 47. So
I don't know. And I know that when you look at it, your first thought is, okay, I don't know. But then you start finding multiple references, cross-referencing the same information over a long period of time.
Mm-hmm.
That that's where I begin to say, okay, I buy that. I'll add this one in because I understand that. But it's not new.
Yep.
It's been going on for a long time. Well, and if you want to go ancient alien, there are recorded things going and papyruses and all kinds of stuff going back thousands of years of people explaining what they saw in the sky. And you have to look at that and go, well, were they so into science fiction, 3,000 years ago, that they would take the time to sit down and write out this whole description on papyrus or carve it into a stone or whatever? So they must have seen what they saw.
Well, and you wonder about that. Did they saw what they saw, or you had, like you just referenced, science fiction writers? Who were the science fiction writers in prehistoric times?
Who were they writing for?
Drawing cave pictures with
right.
I'm going to make this guy really tall with a big round head.
You look at the pictographs, and didn't they people? Oh, you have to go see the rock northeast of the such and such. Oh my God, it's a great story. Go check it out.
I've been there 3 times already.
And he made ant people. It's hilarious.
It's great.
I just so I have to look at that and think these people saw something. They interacted with something.
Yes, they did.
And it was profound enough that they carved into stone, or they wrote it down and passed it along to the king or somebody else to see.
The tribal chieftain, yeah.
So I just don't buy that it was some fictional writer. And did they have fictional writers in the middle? Yeah, sure. In the Middle Ages, you have Chaucer and all these people. They're writing fictional stories and mythology and things like that. But there's a difference between what we know to be mythology or fictional writing and what they're explaining as something they actually saw.
Right.
Right.
There was something I was going to get to during the show, and I ran out of time. I didn't quite get to it, but out of my own book, The Rise and Fall of the Nephilim,
available on audio.
Available on audio. Also available in, where is it? Right, that's Exodus. It's available in Spanish. There it is.
If you haven't read Scotty's books, you really need to.
The Rise and Fall of the Nephilim in Spanish. So there's a Spanish edition.
I have a whole bookshelf just for your books.
Thank you. Well, here, get this. This is a section I wanted to read. It was when I started talking about religion and how would our religions be affected. I want to get your take on that, Dave, in a minute here. But in this book, and it's in the first chapter, entitled Science Almighty, and where I'm trying to set the stage here. I'm just going to pick up a spot and read this, and you can react to this. The threats to human dignity and integrity are being ramped up to extraordinary levels of stress. When what we most need is wisdom, says Yale computer guru David Geltner. Decrying the dangerous trend to know it all, scientists promulgating the idea that religion and spirituality are trash. What we are seeing trended more and more is that wisdom, moral seriousness, and adherence to religion and spirituality are coming under grave and perpetual attack. and more often by the people who are prominent figures in the scientific community. Crusading atheism, combined with an aggressive desire to secularize the world through the funnel of science and skeptical thought, has become a major hurdle to accepting the fact that not all things are measurable by the scientific method. The first step needed in order to help science and faith find common ground is a starting point of admitting our absolute ignorance. We know nothing, none of us. With all our glorified sciences and metaphysical mumbo-jumbos, really know anything at all. We've experienced only the tip of the iceberg when it comes to the physical workings of our universe. And we need to constantly question and test and discover, then question and test to discover more. This process is what separates those who would remain in self-imposed make-believe worlds from those who would be seekers of fact and truth. Now, here's a couple of quotes. This is what I wanted to get at. Eugenie Scott, the director for the National Center of Science Education, was asked a question about whether science could ever prove or disprove God's existence. With a wry smile, she said, "Well, we don't exactly have a godometer, do we?" And she went on to express that she was highly skeptical that such a device could ever be conceived, let alone manufactured. We don't, and probably never will, have a test or a device that could measure that sort of information. Some things are simply unquantifiable. This doesn't mean such things don't exist. It just means that there are some things that we may never know for sure. As appealing as it would be to assert with 100% certainty that God exists, we simply cannot. The existence of God is something that can only be accepted by faith, not blind faith, but a faith that recognizes there are some veils that cannot be pierced. The scientific method can only take us so far, and that explanation will only ever leave us dissatisfied. But then again, we can never be satisfied until we reach that unknown point. So to debase belief in the divine and the explained mysteries that surround us simply because they are not definable by science is to display utter arrogance at best and total stupidity at worst. Science, without the understanding of how everything loops together with faith and spirituality, is only half the picture. And now this is the quote I wanted to get at, finally. That was all groundwork to get to this. And then there's the other side of that equation. Pope John Paul II, in an address to the Pontifical Academy of Sciences in Rome, declared on October 27th, 1996, his acceptance of evolution as a fact of nature, noting that he believed there was no real war between science and religion in the first place. He said, in part, consideration of the method used in diverse orders of knowledge allows for the accordance of 2 points of view which seem irreconcilable. The sciences of observation describe and measure with even greater precision the multiple manifestations of life, while theology extracts the final meaning according to the Creator's design. Christians and the religious right reacted angrily to the Pope's statements, and Henry Morris, President Emeritus of the Institute for Creation Research, responded, the Pope is just an influential person. He's not a scientist. There is no scientific evidence for evolution. All the real solid evidence support creation. And so the battle rages on.
Interrupt you there just for a second.
What's that? Yep.
I'm going to interrupt you there just for a second. And yet, the Pope may not be a scientist, and yet the Vatican has a huge observatory and has practically since Galileo's time been studying the stars and all kinds of things. And one of the things that came out in the program I was talking about earlier is that the Vatican, within their sacred archives, has all kinds of things that they have over the centuries collected. Okay. and that includes non-human skulls.
Yep.
And that includes written accounts from ancient times as well as modern times about beings and craft that are virtually identical. So they can't, I mean, it's one thing to say that hey, this guy in Portland saw this thing and he went on the news and somebody in Seattle said they saw one too. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. It's another thing to say, here's this guy in ancient Rome who wrote about this experience. And here's this guy in Peru who wrote about a similar experience with a similar type craft and a similar type being. And then here's something that happened in the 1960s, and it matches those other two documents.
Right.
Okay. Because that makes you go, well, there's got to be something to that. That's not just three people that, because they had no contact with each other, and yet they wrote of a similar experience and things like that. So there's, the Vatican has stuff. And I would point out that the Vatican came out not that long ago and basically said, we don't have a problem with there being life on other planets. We believe that there is life on other planets. That it doesn't go against Catholicism or Christianity in any way. And they use the argument that Jesus says, in my Father's mansion, there are many rooms.
Yes.
In other words, to say, look, the heavens is full of very populated planets all over the place. And they're all his people. They're all his creations.
Right.
You look at, there's, I don't know, what do they have now? A list of 10 alien beings that we have theoretically been in contact with or know of.
According to some source, I was going to say Stanton Friedman, not Stanton Friedman, this guy that I told you about from Albuquerque, and others, that there are something like 218 species of alien.
Okay, the guy from Albuquerque
already here.
Is he kind of a chubby, balding scientist guy?
I never saw him. I never saw him.
High-pitched voice?
Friedman.
Because there is a guy out there that like Bob Lazar, was like a young genius that had invented something while he was still in high school or very early in college, and the government came by and said, how'd you get this information? And he's like, oh, I created it, right? And this general or colonel or something put him in a car and drove him out to this base where they had a similar type thing, but like the size of a school bus. Mm-hmm. He had built just a small little prototype thing, right? And they were reverse engineering this. It's an engine, and they were reverse engineering it. And this kid, in essence, had stumbled onto the technology and built it.
Well,
okay. And so he worked for the government for quite a while, and I don't know if I want to say he's a whistleblower. He left the government and just spoke freely about what he did, like Lazar. Mm-hmm. He's like, I'm not gonna pretend that my work hasn't created this, that, and the other thing. I'm just gonna go out and be honest about what's going on. And his name is David something. I cannot think of his last name, but he's very interesting to listen to.
This guy, to fill in some of the blanks of this story, this friend of mine, female, she was into UFO research pretty heavily. I met her in the mid-90s, and she did a lot of research. She knew a lot of people that are the in-the-know who's who ufology, such as Stanton Friedman and some of these others. And they deemed her credible. She got me interviews with these guys. And so she gave a story of having gone out on a date with this fellow that she met, that walked up to her somewhere, and they met, and he asked her out, and sure. And they ended up in one of the state parks there late one night. And she called me in the morning after this, when she had gotten home from this all-night date. They would spent the night out in the park looking at the stars and talking. And she called me because she was so unnerved and so excited and so shook up. She was crying, and she said, we would sit there, and he said, do you want to see some UFOs? And she said, sure. And he said, look up in the sky. And she said, Scotty, I looked up and I saw the lines, and then they would turn and they would move. And then he said, what do you want them to do? And she said, have it turn to the left. I went, what? And it turned left. And things like that. And then she said, just before sun came up, we were buzzed by 2 fighter jets that couldn't have been 75 feet off the ground. And she said they buzzed over us and had a wing tipped to him. She assumed to him. And there was a little more to that. He says, we're going to get buzzed in just a second here. And he didn't have any apparatus on. He wasn't listening to anything. And sure enough, 2 planes came over.
That we know of.
And that we know of. And this is late 90s is when this took place. Early 2000s. And she had another incident not long after that. She didn't want to see this guy anymore. There was something. I talked to Stanton Friedman. Stanton Friedman talked to him. Had an interview with him privately, and where he said the guy's credible, but I don't know how he knows what he knows.
Yeah.
Well,
I look at so Billy Wilder theoretically could do the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
People were like, "How do you get all these pictures of the UFOs?" And he says, "I go out and stand in the field and I meditate and I think on them, and they come."
This is what Stephen Greer does.
Yeah, and. So where I was going with the comments about the number of aliens is there are certain aliens like the Palladians, the Nordics, and things like that speak of, don't speak of God as we do, but that love is the focus, love is the key, love is the meaning and all that stuff, which is God's message. So you kind of wonder that I believe there are certain of the aliens that are following the same path, even though it might not be exactly the same path with the same prophets and the same, because they had their own planet and so on and so forth. But the message was the same. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. And then there are aliens that I don't think are connected to that at all. I look at the reptilians and think, yeah, there's not a lot of God in you.
Well, isn't some of the stories about the reptilians is that the reptilians, the extraterrestrial reptilians, were at war in prehistory with the terrestrial races of aliens.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's those stories. It's all mythology to us, but those are the stories that already exist.
But where does mythology come from? Mythology always has some root or core value of truth in it. So
yes.
So there was something there. I've often believed, well, I do believe that our solar system started out with at least 3, maybe 4 planets that were habitable. And at some point, either due to a natural disaster or a catastrophic war or something like that, one of those planets, being what is now the asteroid belt, was destroyed. And when it was destroyed, it peppered the one side of Mars. Mars has one side that's much more cratered than the other, and I think stripped it of its atmosphere. In that happening, I believe that the gravitational pull shifted in the inner solar system, and Venus transferred further in and burned off its oceans and things like that. And so I think that Earth became sort of a lifeboat for some of these other beings. Those that could escape their world escaped here. And so we have a planet that has we're all one species, but we're all very different genetically in the sense of you look at people that live in the Himalayas and people that live in the what's the Peruvian mountain chain?
Andes
are capable of living in rarefied air, which most of us wouldn't be able to survive very long in.
Right.
Okay. Maybe their planet had thinner atmosphere to start with, and that's why they settled there, because it was easy for them to settle there. Maybe people from Mars or Venus were darker skinned to start with because they were closer to the sun, and they settled in Africa on the plains because they found it more like home and such. So, you look at things like that. Maybe the people that lived out on the planet that was destroyed didn't have as much sun exposure. They were much fairer skinned and lighter eyed and such, and they became the people that settled up in our Nordic regions because they could deal with the colder temperatures. It was more like home.
Maybe.
And such.
And this is all, all we can do is speculate.
And I know that St. John thought about the same thing. Zachary St. John kind of talks about the same sort of stuff.
Right.
But I just, I don't find that far-fetched. I don't find that hard to believe when I look at the way the solar system is, the way our cultures are and stuff, and how we were all isolated at first and have mingled over time. Yeah. So, and that would also explain that within these various cultural areas, they have this forbidden technology or forbidden archaeology that we find, where we find things that are advanced but buried in a layer of rock that they couldn't have existed in at the time that they existed. Right. in our understanding of the evolution of man.
It's all plausible theorizing is what it is what we come down to. And I do the same thing in the books I've written. I do the same kind of speculative theorizing. Maybe it's this, maybe it's that. And then you have to, when I ask the question about religion, it's because you have to start juxtaposing. Why I read the stuff I did about the Pope. There was another thing where the Pope had said something about recognizing the possibility of life on other planets does not fall outside any kind of biblical belief system. And he explained himself as the Pope. And, I look at that and I go,
well, would it make a difference to you if somebody landed here and they said, hey, we're from the Pleiades?
No.
And we've been coming back and forth here for the last, 20,000 years.
Yeah.
And
no, what all that would mean to me is the way theology is set up biblically. I don't think it's a universal theology. I think it's an earthly theology. It could be, thou shalt have no other gods before me. Is that implying that there are other gods?
Well, I think it does.
So. And who are those gods of? Are they of other worlds, other planets, whatever it might be? And so I think that to me, it's not inconsistent with Christianity, so, or Judaism even. So,
right, and so I think that I know the Brookings report came out, and they were like, "Oh my God, if we did this, then the society would collapse, the religion would freak out, and all this stuff would happen, and the whole world would come to a screeching halt."
I think
that might have been true,
but
that might have been true in the late 40s and early 50s.
Right.
Okay. But modern man today is much more open-minded to all this stuff. Now, there's an interesting story that comes out of Hollywood in the early 60s. And Roddenberry and a handful of other writers, sci-fi writers, and some people like this, some film producers, were brought into a meeting room with government officials, and they said, we want to open up the public consciousness. We want you to do stories about a federation of planets. The good guys are like this, this, and this, and the bad guys are an empire, and they're like this, this, and this. Okay, and they kind of lay out how they want these stories to go. And if you look, there's a fairly consistent thing that happens in sci-fi. Lizard people and reptilians, almost always the bad guy. They're predators, and we have to be leery of them. Okay. There's
the Gorn.
Yeah, the high intellectuals, the Vulcans, and people like that. They're okay. They're part of the peaceful federation, and
they're the good guys. guys. Yeah.
They're the good guys, and we need to emulate that and be like them. And you look at what's the one with the bugs? That is it Heinlein that wrote? No, not Heinlein. Piper that wrote the ones about all the intelligent bugs, and we were in a fascist sort of state fighting the bugs, and you know what I'm talking about.
Yep.
There was a whole series of movies that came out based on that, and he's a post World War II vet that was a writer and believed that in order to have the right to citizenship and to vote, you should serve first and stuff. And so I think that he was also one of those ones in this room, but the whole concept was that they would start cranking out material like this, and that then the people would become more open-minded as they read this material, so that when full disclosure happened, they wouldn't be freaked out. They'd be accustomed to the concept that there are multiple alien races, that there's a good federation out there of planets, that there's an evil empire that we're at war with, and so on and so forth, and that we would take it in stride. And I think we're there. I think that Star Trek, when you look at when Space Force was created, you know, there's a portion of that audience that's like, oh, finally we're on our way. You know, we're moving in that direction. Right. So I'm a believer in solar warning, and I think that part of Trump's reason for doing that is we're going to create Space Force. The people are going to become accustomed to people serving in Space Force, and at some point down the road, we're going to say, "Hey, look at these ships we have.
Yeah,
we built them secretly, and now we have ships." And I think too that they were getting to a point where they needed to crew more ships, and we need to recruit. And how do you recruit people into the service? And they're going to be off planet without their folks, you know, figuring it out.
Right.
Now, in the other element in Above Top Secret that they talked about, and this is something to think about. I haven't decided if I believe in this or not, but for plausible deniability, it makes a lot of sense. Now, their theory was that the Cold War never actually happened. The Cold War was a fictional thing created by the US, Great Britain, and Russia to explain away billions of dollars they were spending. And that in reality, the three governments were working together to build the Solar Warden fleet and things like that. Okay? That they were working in unison to create a base on the moon and create a base on the Mars and so on and so forth, and to have these fleet of ships that were manned by crew from all three countries. And when you think about it, why would we need to build nuclear missiles so we could destroy Russia 100 times over or 1,000 times over? If we've destroyed them once, we've destroyed them. So there's no logical need to continue on destroying them once they've been destroyed. So you really only need to destroy your enemy once, and they're destroyed. When the Cold War ended,
this is true.
When the Cold War ended and you went out, people wanted to see the nuclear stockpile in Russia. There were empty warehouses because they had never built the missile heads that they claimed to have built. I suspect that the same is true with us. And look how quickly all those missile bases across the Western United States are empty.
Yes.
Well, why would we empty them? Why would they not still be viable protection for us?
It's a good question.
Okay. I just don't believe that this stuff ever existed in the way we were told it existed. And it let's face it, nobody's stupid enough to pay $600 for a toilet seat.
Right.
You know?
Or for a hammer.
Or a hammer or whatever. And so when you look at the line item things, Sure, you can argue that, oh, well, they're gouging us because it's the government, but blah, blah, blah. But I don't think it was. I think it was they had to explain away billions of dollars every year. Some of it could be listed as black ops or black budgets, but you couldn't do that with everything, because at some point the Congress is going to say, holy crap, what are you doing with all this black ops stuff? Somebody's going to want to know.
Yeah.
So if you can show them books and books and books of ledgers where they overspent on nuts and bolts and toilet seats and crap like that to try and explain away why they spent so much money, at least they're only thinking you're stupid.
Right.
You know? So I don't know. I look at the Solar Warden stuff, and it makes sense from that standpoint that they could have built it by utilizing that as their means of operation, that the Cold War didn't really exist the way we thought it did, and that money was shared money between the three countries to build up this fleet and build up bases.
And maybe you're right. It would be very interesting to know what the hell exists. And you know what I'm tired of? We see this on all sorts of issues in politics, all sorts of issues in current events, is how the hell do we know we're really getting truth or the fact?
Well, we're not. We're straight up not getting truth.
That's it.
And here's the other hole they've dug themselves into. Okay. Theoretically, one of the advancements that has come from interaction with alien beings is advanced medicine, cure for cancer and things like that.
Right.
Okay. So how long have they been sitting on that? Have they been sitting on it since the 70s, since the 50s? You know, where in line in the timeline did those advancements come that they sat on, that they didn't share with the public? Because they could have said, hey, this lab figured this out and we've cured cancer, but they didn't. Okay. So now when they do full disclosure or 0 point energy or something like that, okay, where we could have had a environmentally friendly energy that was free energy and everybody could have had access to it. You could run your cars on it and your boats and your planes and your houses and whatever, right? At some point when that comes out, then they have to explain why we've been raping the planet and doing all this stuff for all these decades when we didn't have to. You know, why Uncle Frank is dead when he didn't have to be dead because you sat on a cure.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So then the government has a lot of explaining to do, and the government is going to find themselves in a situation where, yeah, we lied to you, but we had a legitimate reason because, you know, we had to protect ourselves.
We had a legitimate reason.
You know, but the reasoning falls apart then. So let's say the Cold War was fake to finance their ships. Well, then you didn't need to keep this a secret to keep the Russians from finding out if you were working with the Russians. So that's BS.
Yep.
Okay. You didn't have to hide this stuff. All that really happened is some fat cats got really rich because treating symptoms for an illness is more valuable to them than treating or curing that illness, because you only get that check once.
Right. Well,
okay.
Dave, you know what I think you need to do? I think you need to write the novel. You've got a great concept for a story there, which is also the great concept for devising a possible speculative, factual timeline or truth. Because all of these things look like certain things, and you're going to have somebody who's going to come along and say, no, that doesn't work that way. That doesn't work. You can't make that work. But then you're going to have somebody else who will say, well, that's the cover up. So all of these things are layer upon layer upon layer upon layer of falsehood. What was the line in Rob Roy that said, to great men, she said, the truth is a lie yet untold. And, that's, I think that's what we are experiencing now. with this and a lot of other things right now.
Well, I think that we're on the edge of actual disclosure, and I think that it's coming out. There was a interview I saw with some admiral. I can't remember his name, but he was an acting admiral at the Pentagon, and they came to him and they said, okay, we want you to start releasing this UFO stuff. You're going to set up a department, and you guys will go through, figure out what stuff should be trickled out and what stuff shouldn't be trickled out, and start doing it. And that was 10 years ago, 8 years ago.
Yeah.
COVID has really messed with my timeline, because for 3 years we sat here and didn't do anything.
Pretty much, yeah.
And I keep thinking, I forget those 3 years. I have to add them in, but yeah, since the 2000s, that's happened, and so, you know, I think the government has figured out that they're fucked, as the Irish would say.
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay, because they've told this lie for so long that when they start to reveal it, there is going to be a whole accountability that has to happen, and nobody wants to be in that position. You know.
Yes.
And they can argue, well, the people in charge at the time made mistakes, and we've just done what we could to slowly break out of it. But again, people are going to say, well, the cure of cancer would have been a really great way, like a decade ago, if you've been sitting on it that long.
If you'd just told us, yeah.
You know, whatever that is, and I look at Bell Industries, who through Philip Corso, they were given all kinds of technologies to work on, fiber optics and all kinds of stuff that were products taken from Roswell. And they said, take it and run with it and see what you can do with it. And they invented all kinds of stuff and profited off of it.
Mm-hmm.
Why didn't they do the same thing with some of the medical advancements? Now, maybe some of these devices that we have, you know, like the CT scanner and stuff, sure, maybe that is a product of that.
Maybe it is
reverse engineered technology done in a bigger, bulkier way, because we didn't have the whatever at the time. But they were theoretically, the Roswell ship in the 40s had silicone chips and stuff like that, and that's where we got that technology from. You know, look how fast computers advanced. When you look at the computer of 1970 to the computer of 1980, one is a huge giant room, or maybe 2 or 3 rooms, or even a floor in a building, and suddenly you're down to a desktop.
Well, you look at one of the cogs in that theoretical machine was transistor radios.
Yeah.
You look at how transistors suddenly,
another Bell thing, the Bell industry thing.
Roswell, we had transistors, and technology burst wide open at that point. Look at the advance of technology in the last 50, 60 years.
Oh, yeah.
And you get the idea.
I'm sitting here holding a smartphone. It has more power than my computer on the desktop does.
It has more power than the computer that was on the Apollo 11 mission. So,
well, a Texas Instrument calculator, I think, has more power than that.
Yeah, probably. More calculating power.
Yeah.
Well,
but it's just, that's, you know, yes, they did release things. We've gained technology, but some of the most important things, medical things that could have been released and haven't been released, that's a huge tragedy that they're going to have to explain at some point.
Sure.
And it's not going to be pretty. And you're going to have a lot of lawsuits against the government.
Yeah.
Because of so many generations of lost people that didn't have to die.
Right.
And it's one thing to say, well, okay, my father was going to die eventually anyways, but why did my child have to die?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. You stole my child's life. You know, I can accept the fact that my father died, but I can't accept the fact that you took my little kid.
Yep.
You know, when you had the technology and stuff. So I think there's things like that I don't know if the government's ready for that. I don't know if they themselves have really thought about what they're opening themselves up to.
Right. Well, this is all great fodder for thought, great fodder for future conversations, because we're just about out of time here.
Well, and I've got to fly.
Yeah, I hear you. You got to get your parents taken care of. That's quite a task you've got on you, and very respectable, by the way.
Oh,
so, everybody, let's say goodnight to Uncle Dave, and then we're going to wrap this show up. Dave, good stuff. Really good thoughts. I didn't say a lot because there's a lot of what you're saying I don't really know how to speak to, other than to go, well, yeah, I think about that too. Yeah. So we'll have another discussion on this topic, I think, in the very near future, and talk more about this.
Close with this: be well, everyone, and remember, do something good for someone.
There it is.
Live a life in
Uncle
service.
Dave. See you later. All right, folks, we're going to start wrapping it up for tonight. So I want to thank you all for being here. This is our second broadcast from Patreon, and I hope that you will help spread the word a little bit, and that you enjoy this. I will continue in turn working on getting a little better chat room set up for this show, see what we can do, what the possibilities are for that. And you keep coming, you keep inviting others to come and make their way in here. We'll keep growing this show. And as the show grows, I think we're going to have a really fun time with it. So everybody, thank you for being here. Thank you for giving me your time. Thank you for giving me your money, frankly, to be here, for spending a few bucks to be on here. And I appreciate it more than you know. So does my wife, Rainey. So we will see you on Friday as usual, but keep your eyes open. Might be something tomorrow. Maybe some tarot readings tomorrow. We'll do live. We'll see what happens. So all of you, I want you to have a good night. We'll see you next time. Live long and prosper.